Okay, great. So we are now live. We'll wait a few minutes for people to join, and then we'll get started in a couple of minutes.
Perfect. I'm really glad that you started this initiative. You took time, and there's so many other things you could have done with your career and your education. So I'm really grateful. I know you're paying it forward, and some of the girls don't even know it until 20 years later how much this has helped them. So I am very grateful that you're doing it.
I appreciate it. I mean, we can't do it without everyone who supported it. So, and that includes all of the speakers like you.
The first person, right? You're blazing the trail for people. So it will take more time because you have to, if you imagine if you were in a forest and blazing that trail, you have to pull the weeds, you got to remove some trees, go around trees, create a path, chop down certain things, plant other things, move the rocks around. So just think of it as that.
Exactly. That's a great analogy. I love it. Yeah. But I mean, I like learning too. My motto has always been a lifelong learner, and I'm not interested in just the mundane routine. I love the fact that at least what I'm doing right now provides me with a new challenge every day.
How do you get some of your contacts to reach, let's say, the state of Washington?
I actually ended up meeting the mayor of Tukwila, Washington. And he loved the program almost instantaneously. They have an intensely diverse population. Their high school, they have, I believe he said more than 50 languages spoken in that one high school.
Wow.
So it's a gate, from the Eastern Hemisphere. That is a gate because it's so close to Seattle. And so they do have an influx of students, and he is really big on making sure that those students have the supports they needed. So again, within a minute, he said, once he heard what the mission was about, he's like, we need your program. And he's moved the conversation forward with the superintendent. So we're hoping to make that happen. We've been blessed. I think we've definitely been blessed. It's a challenge, but hopefully we can make sure that we reach our mission and these girls are able to become leaders. And that's really the biggest goal. And I see a lot of potential in so many of them. So let's see if we can help them along.
Grooming.
Thank you. Let's hear your wonderful story now. So I'm going to welcome everybody again. So thank you for joining Speak Mentorship Speaker Series. This February event is joined by Kim La. We're so immensely honored to be hosting Kim La, who has a phenomenal story and also will be able to give a great deal of insight into how to manage your finances, especially for college, but also early career. These tips are something that I wish I would have known when I was younger. I would have definitely used them, and it would have helped me avoid a lot of the student debt that many of us do take on after college. So I'm going to quickly introduce Kim, and then we'll get started. Kim came from very humble beginnings. Born in Vietnam, her mother, brother, and Kim were boat people who escaped to a refugee camp in Malaysia. She worked part-time to support herself through college while earning straight A's. She started her career in public accounting as an auditor with Arthur Andersen, Big Five, until the firm shut down in May 2002. In 2003, she took the entrepreneurial plunge and found A2Q2 to help two friends to get their work visas. A2Q2 is a global accounting firm specializing in internal audit and Sarbanes-Oxley compliance with clients in Silicon Valley like Airbnb, Uber, and Stanford University. I'm sure you've all heard of those. She is also dedicated giving back by providing bookkeeping services for nonprofits at reduced costs. She is married and has two teenagers, ages 16 and 15. Again, an amazing story we're about to hear. So Kim, take it away.
Thank you so much for such a kind introduction. And I feel excited and really privileged to be here because I was thinking as I was writing some of the slides, it's 40 years. 2019 will be 40 years since I came to the US. I came here with nothing, with my mother and my brother, and we were homeless. We were hungry. We were desperate to make something of ourselves. And so this was a great way for me to reflect and be very thankful, be really grateful for all of the support we've received along the way. And I wanted to share it with you. So what I was going to do is you can read my short bio here, but really what I wanted to do is share with you that the journey that I've had is because of the great people around me who've supported me. And Speak Mentorship is one of those programs I wish I had when I was growing up, because my mother to this day does not speak English. She speaks food, right? Certain things, phrases. She goes to the grocery store. She does all of that, but she doesn't hold conversations in English. So many of the things that I learned, I stumbled around. I made lots of mistakes, and I wanted to share with you that it's still possible, and it's a great journey to be able to do this. And so that's what I'm going to share now. So here, what we're going to do is there's a short video. It's only 6 minutes. I wanted you to watch it so that you get a feel and context for when I say nothing, what it means to be hungry and to be homeless, just to hear that. And then I'll pick up the story.
I grew up homeless. Saigon, Vietnam, 1978. My mother, my brother, and I are sneaking out of town. Our rendezvous point was a tiny fishing village along the Mekong River. You see, we'd lost a war, and part of that, we lost our freedom. And to me, I was 6 at that time, this was just a great adventure. We slipped into a tiny fishing boat, sailed into the South China Sea. My mother is seasick the entire time and stays below deck. I occasionally slip onto deck, listening to rumors of pirate ships trolling the sea, looking for victims like us to rape and to rob. We spend 5 days at sea. We run out of food and water, and we were only eating rice with salt and pepper to begin with. And on top of that, our boat engine had died. We were drifting in this vast sea, aimlessly, no land in sight. And finally, we spotted land. We were so excited, we all jumped off the boat. We finally found someplace. I'm living under a plastic tarp, dirt floors, thatched walls, mosquitoes and head lice everywhere. The lice was so bad that we had to shave my 4-year-old brother's head to get rid of it. Mom's depressed, and rightfully so. She'd left behind 3 other kids and everything she knew, everything she owned. And so it falls on me to get in line the nearby wells for water. It's my job to get in line for food rations from the United Nations. Vegetables and fruit were really rare. We are living in a refugee camp in Malaysia. We are actually the lucky ones, waiting for any country to accept us. After 1 year, there was a generous family from a church helped us come to the U.S. Starting with nothing, no money, we didn't know anyone, we didn't know the language. We rent a tiny bedroom with another Vietnamese family. My mother, my brother, and I sharing one room, sharing one bed. My mom works minimum wage as a dishwasher, even though in Vietnam she actually owned a large restaurant. And I learned English watching Sesame Street. I'm sitting in this tiny living room, and the 2 sisters from the other family are sitting close by, and they're speaking to each other in English because they know I don't understand English. And I feel like an outsider, unwanted, lonely. And suddenly they say something to each other in English, and the light bulb goes off in my head. And I was actually part of the conversation. It was so freeing, part of that. Coming to America, I thought my days of being homeless were over. But I was wrong. My mother meets a man who she thinks is a great husband and a great provider. And living with him is like having a noose around my neck, slowly tightening around us. Because whenever they have big arguments, he kicks us out of his house And we spend occasional nights, cold nights, huddled in our van, hoping that he will take us back. And from those experiences, I told myself that when I grew up, I would be self-reliant, self-sufficient, and no one would ever have that kind of power over me again. And I know the only way to break out of that cycle, to break out of that poverty and dependency, is to get an education. And so when I graduated from high school, $500 to my name, I leave Tucson, Arizona, and I go to Phoenix for college. I'm living in a 2-bedroom apartment, 4 other girls, so there are 5 of us. And I volunteer to sleep on the floor because there's no room for an extra bed for me, and it's cheaper that way. Because I reminded myself, my goal was to get straight A's, graduate, and get a job. The college years. I was free to explore. I was free to grow. I was free to learn who I am. Those were awesome years. And what I discovered about myself was that I was resilient, determined, strong, tough, and lovable. That I'd never felt before. After 4 years of college, I had 5 job offers from the 6 major accounting firms. So I met my goal. And today, my passion is to build an ecosystem where women and minorities reach power and financial liberation. Thank you.
So I share my story with you so that you can hear when I say we start with nothing, or when I started with nothing, and the obstacles. I know many of you have obstacles in your life, and you can say, I didn't have the privileges, I didn't know about these things, but I share my story to show you the possibilities. If I can do it, I know you can do it, because you have resources like Speak Mentorship. You have so many people who want to help you. And so it's been such a privilege for me to put together some of this. And as I piece together the story, my story over the 20, 30 years, 40 years that I've been here, I thought about the most exciting times. One of the most exciting times for me was actually the high school years starting college. Because while it was so challenging, it also was one of the things that made it so much when you accomplish something, the sense of satisfaction, the accomplishments, knowing that you've been able to do it. And so I know you can do it. And what I've done is I've put together what I call 10 tactical tips, things that looking back, I did well, which I didn't know was helpful, and things I wish I'd done better, wish I knew that I could have implemented and someone had told me. So we're going to start with that. Okay. So my first tip at the time is, number 1 is living within walking distance or biking distance of a college if possible. And later on, you'll see that part of that is because what I did is it saves you a lot of travel time to classes. And I actually did some quick calculations where within a week, that's an extra $100. And in a semester, it could be an extra $2,000. And it's because what you're saving is in terms of the cost of a car maintenance, insurance, and parking, and all of these things. So as I mentioned in my video, I left Tucson with $500. That's all I had, because while I worked throughout my high school years, all of that money was to help my mom for our living expenses. So I had nothing saved up. And so it was a really tiny amount. So when I left Tucson to go to Phoenix, it's about a 2-hour drive there. When I got there, one of the first things I did was I just said, I don't have a car. It was, my mom did drop me off at the college, and then it was up to me to figure out how do I find where to go to live and all of that. And that's why I always had roommates throughout my college years. But one of the things I didn't have to worry about was maintaining a car, paying for a car, and all of those. So I always had roommates, and I lived about half a mile or a mile away, either bike to school, bike to work. And I happened to, at that time, also work mostly on campus as well. And it was out of necessity. It wasn't, in hindsight, it wasn't like I had a brilliant idea. It was just I didn't have a car, so I couldn't go much further out to work. Now, the what you may say is, hey, I have a car, I can go make money and do that. But remember, my main focus at the time when I graduated high school, and my goal was I wanted to get some type of education, some type of skill so that I could be self-supporting. So what I did was I just stripped away all the things that I could do without, like what's the bare minimum? And I literally was thinking, how do I pay for school? How to pay for rent? How do I pay for utilities? These were just the bare minimums. The car, I was like, I can take a bus, I can walk, I can bike. So that was one of my tips as I consider it. So for many of you who think of financial difficulties as one of your obstacles, this is a great way to do it, is living close within walking distance, biking distance, commuting distance, public transit type of arrangement. So the second thing that really worked for me when I was in college, and I didn't realize it, was working on campus in an area of my major or of my interest. And I'll even broaden it to say areas where I could expand my skill set. So one of the I had 3 college jobs. So one of the first one was an English department, just a admitted little runner, the gopher, go make copies, go do this and that. But I learned that I needed to get some computer skills. And this will sound so foreign to many of you who are familiar with this. When I was going to high school, there weren't even computers were just coming out at that time. And we were literally typing up our term papers and our finals and so forth on a typewriter. So one of the ideas I had was, what if I went and worked for the IT department? So I worked in the computing commons area that supported all the students. And I was still the office helper. But by working there, it gave me some skills like computer skills. I learned email. And I know all of you are just rolling your eyes and saying, email, I can't believe. Yes, back then, email was fairly new. There were such things as listservs and for even to date myself a little more, Excel, which is the spreadsheet program that so many people use today. The time that I was going to school, we were using a precursor to even that. It was called SuperCalc or Lotus 123. And by working in the IT department, I got exposure to those types of skills that would later help me. So that was one area of finding an interest. Not that I had an interest in IT, it was just I realized, oh, there's some skills that I don't have. And if I work in an office environment, I could learn these skills. So same for you. If you have an interest in marketing, if you have an interest in education, interest in accounting and engineering, if you work around some of those areas, you pick up those skills. So one of my other jobs after I left the IT environment was I went to work in the accounting department at Arizona State University. And again, it was a lowly office person, but I was answering the phone. I was helping the accountants and still making copies and doing things. But being around people, I got to hear the terminology. I got to know and see what it is that they were doing. And that helped me develop more of my understanding of my area of interest. And I know at your stage, and even when I went to high school, there wasn't much in terms of career planning. People would say you should go to college, but I had no idea. And if you are from an Asian family, the 3 careers I always heard about growing up was you are a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. So for me, even to go and become an accountant, my mom had no concept of what an accountant does other than you're supposed to add up a bunch of numbers. So being able to do internships or being able to work in these areas to give you an idea of what people actually do day to day is really helpful. And how does this make sense from a financial perspective? Because going to college, getting an education it costs you time and it costs you money. And if you don't know what you want to do, you can still get your prerequisites, you get your general education classes, but along the way, get exposure so that you don't end up spending 10 years in college, racking up a lot of college debts. For me, it was very much a necessity. I set my goal. I have to graduate in 4 years. I couldn't afford to stay any longer. So I had to be very tactical and really think about, how do I spend my time and how do I spend the money that I have when I was paying for classes? So tip number 3 I have is, it's again very tactical. The nuts and bolts of it was, I scheduled, so many of our colleges and universities have classes either Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday. And so I figured out early on that in order for me to work to support myself, I needed a block of time that was at least 4, 6, or 8 hours in order to work. And so I scheduled my classes as much as possible, depending on the semester. Almost all of my classes were Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So those entire 3 days, I would take the earliest class available and then go to the next class, go to the next class. And what it did for me was it saved me the travel time. So imagine each time you have to go on campus, that's a good hour, half an hour there, half an hour back. And if you can schedule all of your classes there, you've just freed up your time. And I, at that time, I number one, didn't have a car, so I didn't have the luxury of going to places, getting in a car, driving to do these things. So it's that time. And then you can reserve those blocks of time again so that you can actually go to work and work. So the other thing that I did, which I didn't realize until in hindsight, what worked really well, was I had classes, and many of our classes had little breaks in between. It was, whether it's a 45-minute break or sometimes it was an hour break. And what I did was I scheduled the classes almost back to back, but had an hour in between, or maybe even 2 hours in between. And I used that time really efficiently to do my homework. I immediately, as soon as a class was over, if I had written notes and that were unclear, they were scribbles, I would rewrite those notes so that I understood the material, and I would dive right in to start to do my homework. And again, that was something, it was a discipline that I developed because I knew next day I had to go to work. I didn't have a lot of extra time. And I also knew at the time that I didn't have a lot of network. Right? When I literally left Tucson and went to Phoenix, I knew no one in Phoenix. So I didn't have a large study group, a large peer group that I could lean on during my college years. So I had to then lean on resources that the school was providing, like tutoring centers. But in order to do that, I had to do my homework beforehand so that I knew where to get the help from. So that's another tactic that's really helpful in managing your time. And by managing your time, it becomes managing your money. The other tip that I would share is use all of the learning tools that are available in your classes. It's amazing, 20, 30 years ago, what little we had. I'll tell you, I'll share this. My husband is actually dyslexic, and he never graduated high school, much less college. And the reason is, at that time, he was just considered dumb. He was articulate, he would interact with people, he was good with people, but he couldn't pass tests, he took too long to write, and so forth. And at that time, he came from a school, it was a public school, they didn't have resources to really diagnose and identify the fact that while he's bright, he just can't read. It takes him so much longer to read. And as a result, today, when you go to high school, when you go to college, there's so many resources for you. He told me, example, in high school, one of his teachers, because he knew the materials. It would take him a long time when he read the materials at home, did his homework, but during the test, he could never fill out all of his questions in time, or couldn't write all of his answers in time. And one of his teachers actually noticed and would give him an oral test. And whenever he received oral tests, so she would say, tell me the difference between, the history, what was this event, what caused it, and what were the consequences, he could tell her, and he could give a lot of the depth and detail that showed he understood the materials. It was just, he just couldn't read it. So today in your colleges, you will find many of your classes will have recordings. Professors will actually record their lecture so that you can listen to it again if you are if you don't read as well. And there are resources that can help you with that. So take advantage of audio tools, visual tools, and even at colleges, I know now because I have professors who are friends that you can actually, if you have a learning disadvantage, if English is your second language and you have some of these other difficulties, they will actually give you extended time. I think it's time and a half to take your test. So take advantage of that so that you identify how you learn, and there are tools and there are people who are willing to help you, but sometimes they don't know what your challenges are. So you have to raise your hand and ask for that help. So don't feel if you're slow or you don't take tests well, there are certain reasons for it. And today, my husband's very successful in that he manages 60, 80 people in our organization. He manages operations, he does IT, and it's because he's figured out tools and ways to overcome that. The other tip number 6 that I would share with you is introducing yourselves to professors and asking questions during office hours. This one I did not do very well in school. I didn't even realize. I went to talk to professors to ask them questions, but what I didn't realize that professors are one of your biggest, or they can be one of your biggest supporters, and part of it is different companies will come to professors when they have job opportunities, when they have internships, and they will ask those professors, who are the bright students? Who would you recommend for these opportunities? And the professors have a lot of say in it, where they may say, this person they've worked really hard. And if you've made that connection, if you've gone and introduced yourself and said, hey, I'm in your class, I really want to do well. If you have challenges, you can also share. I'm working full-time and going to school. Is it okay if I drop by and ask you questions? As long as the professors see that you are making an effort, that you are trying your best, and of course you have to show some of these results, but use the professor's office hours as a way to help you to build those relationships. They can be very helpful to you. And I know because my friends who are professors tell me these things. And whenever I have opportunities, I've had professors come to me to say, I have someone who's really hardworking. They need a part-time job. They need an internship. Do you know of any opportunities? And I've then opened up internships just specifically for some of those students. So you have a really great resource, someone on your side who wants to help you, but unless you reach out to them and take that initiative, they don't know your circumstances. They don't know your stories. Remember, professors are also people, and you may be surprised. Some of them have very similar backgrounds to you or have hardships that they struggled when they went through their college years. They want to help. So I always emphasize that. I wish I'd known that because I didn't develop that type of relationship with my professors. And one more thing, professors, when you start to apply for scholarships, when you apply for jobs, they may ask for references. And that's why getting to know your professors is such an important thing to do that will help you in the long run. And they want to help. So the tip number 7 that I would share is getting to know your colleges or your departments, regularly visiting them, and searching out for scholarships that are available and apply. Not just the scholarships that are available, but definitely apply. And this is a really fun story for me. I have a friend, she's a longtime friend in college. She's Vietnamese, and she applied for an Italian-American scholarship and actually received it. Looks nothing like, she's Asian, clearly Asian, and she even says it in her scholarship application. But what she was able to pull through was that, look, Asians were immigrants like the Italians as well. And in this case, the scholarship was about how to help a deserving student with a disadvantaged family, immigrants of Italian descent. And in this case, what she later found out was no one applied for the scholarship because as soon as they read that was Italian American scholarship, everybody said, well, I'm not Italian. I shouldn't apply for it. So no one applied. And she was the one person who said, what have I got to lose? And she submitted her application and she told the story of, look, I know immigrants, whether we come from Asia, we come from Europe, we come from Africa, we come from anywhere, we're immigrants, and our stories, our struggles are the same. Coming to the US, finding work, finding our parents making it for us, providing the opportunities. And so she wrote the compelling story. It's her story, it's true, but she got that scholarship. And that really taught me something. Of course, I didn't find out about this until after we graduated, and she told me this. But it reminded me that the opportunities are there. We just self-selected out. We just opted out. Had I known, I would have applied. Lots of other people would have applied, but we automatically assumed because it said Italian American that we said, oh, that wasn't the case. The other example I have is when I mentioned to you, I worked as an aide in the English department. And what I found when I was working there was that a lot of companies or individuals, really people who want to give back and donate, they will have scholarships that come up throughout the year, not just the beginning of the year, not just when you're going through your college application, but for these people, they just want to give. And they would go to a particular department and they will say, I have the scholarship for a deserving student. Can you put the word out? And at that time, I just remember it was word of mouth. People would say, oh, please tell your class at the different classes to apply for this scholarship. What my advice to you is be proactive. Set yourself a reminder every month. Drop by the student financial aid office and say, are there any new scholarships? Look through those job boards or those scholarship boards to see new things are always coming up. Just because you looked for it in January and you don't see anything, it just means it could be February, it could be March, it could be throughout the summer as well. And if you're actively looking for it, you're going to find these opportunities that other people haven't applied for, and your chances increase when you're applying for something that people don't know about. Right? If you're the two people who apply for it, you're more likely to get it than if 100 other people apply. So that was something I wish I'd known, because I did not do that. And it was on hindsight that it was because I didn't take the initiative. I didn't even know such a thing existed. So tip number 8 was actually applying for all of the financial aid and the federal assistance that you can get, like Pell Grants and things like that. Again, when I went to college, I had no idea. I filled out my college application. And the reason I went to an in-state school was because I didn't even have the money. It was $25 at the time to do the college applications and to send it to all these colleges. I didn't even have the $25 to do it. So when I submitted my financial, here's what we don't have in terms of financial aid, whatever was given to me, I didn't search out. I didn't proactively consult with someone to say, what are other ways I could apply for some of these things. I knew about some student loans, so I did take out student loans, but there were so many other types of scholarships or federal assistance programs that I could have applied for. I just didn't know, and I didn't even know to ask. So the theme that you will hear along here is ask people, ask the colleges, ask each of the departments, can you help? How can you help? Where can I go to get help? If they don't know, they're likely to point you in the right direction, but it helps supplement your income so that if you have that big dream of going to MIT, going to Harvard and so forth, it's available. I would say, actually, one of the points I neglected, one of the stories I need to tell you is, so I live in the San Francisco, Silicon Valley Bay Area, and I know of a woman, she's actually my, one of our nieces, related nieces. She actually came here, again, from Vietnam, had nothing, and she applied to Stanford University. And Stanford is one of the hardest places to get admitted to, because not only they want a mix of diversity, and so many Asians apply to Stanford that sometimes it's really hard to get into. But she just said, what have I got to lose? So she applied to Stanford, even knowing with their tuition how expensive it was that she could not afford it. And she got admitted. And Stanford said, we want your determination. We want students like you with your circumstances, your drive and determination to succeed. So they actually found multiple ways to fund and get her all the scholarships to pay for her entire college education. Of course, she still has to keep up good grades. She has other things like work studies and things like that, but they were able to put together a whole package. So the two things I would say for you is, number one, just because you have aspirations to a college that's very expensive, don't let financial aid deter you. But at the same time, my number 9 tip is actually very practical as well, is consider attending a community college for the first 2 years and then transferring to that larger university, because it could save you at least $50,000 to $100,000. I remember I only took a couple of community college classes. That was because I had to pay extra to take some of those classes, and it was something I wanted to learn to make sure I kept my grades up. But today, community colleges are $1,000, maybe $2,000 for a semester, at least in the area that we live in, and sometimes less if you have financial aid, compared to colleges and universities that are $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. Imagine over a 2-year period how much you could save. And for some people, it's money that we don't have. So community colleges have great education. I know this because I have several friends who teach at the large universities, and they also teach at the community colleges. So the type of education that you're going to get depends on you. If you go to class and you're diligent, if your goal is to learn and to get the skills, there's some phenomenal professors out there that teach at the community colleges because they love teaching. That's even better than teaching because they have a big title. They're teaching there because they want to pass on the knowledge. They want to help students learn, and their love of education. Those are the great places to go, and the classes tend to be smaller as well. So plan, if you think, well, maybe big colleges aren't for me, then start with 1 or 2 classes at the community colleges. Very affordable, great quality education. And you can also, at the end, when you transfer to that larger university, your diploma still says Stanford. Your diploma still says big college. People don't care that the first 2 years of your prerequisite general studies, like Math 101 or English 101, they're not focused on that. They know that you've gotten those skills. So that's one thing that I would say that I didn't know about, had no idea that such things existed until I was already in college doing some of this and seeing my friends do that. It's advice today I actually give to my kids. And we've said to my kids, if you don't know what it is that you want, where you want to go to college, if you don't know that you want to go to a big college, little college, close to home or not, then go to community college and get that experience. And it's much less expensive. It's so much cheaper to do it. The 10th piece of advice I have is definitely financially minded, in that when you take out student loans, college loans, repay them on time. There are multiple ways or multiple reasons why this is so helpful for you. Number one is, when you go out in the world, you're going to need a credit record, a credit history is what they'll call it. You're building your track record that you are a responsible borrower. When you borrow money, you will repay it on time. And this helps you when it comes time to buy your first car, when it comes time to buy your first house, your first condo, anything that's a big purchase that you need a loan for. People will always look up your credit history, and college loans is one of the first things that's going to be on your record. So when I went to college, I did get some Pell Grants, but I also had some student loans as well. And when I graduated, within 6 months, you have a grace period, 6 months, they started to send me notices that say, here's your payment plan. Here's how much you need to pay to us. And at the time, I just paid it. Every month, I made sure I paid it on time. And as a matter of fact, one of my goals was I wanted to repay it early, just because I never had debt before, and it felt like such a huge weight on me. So I made it my incentive, my goal to pay it. And how it helped me is that I also then needed to, once I graduated college, I did need to get a used car. So when I went to the used car, I could borrow and get some money. But later on, I had to get a better car for work because I was driving more. Well, that was when I went to my bank. It was a credit union, as a matter of fact, and I applied, and they looked up my credit record. And at that time, even though I hadn't worked that long, I started to build a history of having repaid my college loans, and I was able to get that car loan. So car loans, mortgages, and not only that, it's not even getting the loan, you also get better interest rates on the loan. So banks will look at you and say, if you're high risk to me, I'm going to charge you a higher interest rate. But if you have a history of being a good borrower and repaying them on time, then they will say, I will give you the lowest rate possible. So that's where, from a financial perspective, it makes a lot of sense. The other thing, one of the last points that I will, actually 2 more points, is employers. So today in my own business, we are a firm. We have lots of CPAs, a lot of accountants. And one of the things that we do is we do internal audit. And we know for a fact that almost all companies nowadays will do a background check on you. Depending on how high you go in as well, when you start to advance in your career, they always do a background check. Some companies then also, as part of the background check, they'll do a credit score check. They'll do your credit history check. And what, to them, one of the indicators, if you work in a financial area, if you work in an area of responsibility, they consider a credit score as a signal or an indicator of how responsible you are. And if you haven't paid your loans on time, especially your student loans and things like that, that could be a mark against you. So many college students don't know this, even young working professionals. When you sign on and when you accept your first job, they're going to say, we'd like to do a background check on you. And most of them do criminal checks and some of these other things, but some of them also add credit checks. So what I want you to do is be able to land that first job, keep that first job, and pass it with flying colors. I don't want you to have a mark on your record because of your credit history that prevents you from getting that job. And finally, your student debts. Sometimes I've heard I've had friends who've done really well and friends who've done not so well, actually consider filing for bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is basically saying when you declare that I have no money, I'm not going to repay any of my loans. There is a law. Even if you declare bankruptcy later on in life, student loans is something that will not get wiped away. So it's to the federal government. It sticks with you for the rest of your life until you can start to repay it. So again, college debt, college student loans, that's one of the things that I would highly recommend you pay on time because of the benefits, and you just continue paying, because if you don't, there's going to be penalties for it, long-term penalties that impact your career. So I would highly suggest that as a tip. Again, I had no idea, but now having worked for so long, having seen some of my friends go through financial difficulties and consider these things, I would share this with you so that you know what's ahead. Now, there's some fun tools that I wanted to share with you because I have teenagers in high school as well, and they're getting ready and thinking what they're going to do with their life. Along the way, I'm a huge proponent of free tools, especially online tools. And so I actually asked my kids, what are the tools that you like? Give me some recommendations. And Khan Academy is one of the top rated ones that they go to as their free tutoring. And you see when you land on their website, and I've given you the link here, you can learn anything from anywhere. You can be any age. There's no money. There's no cost to this. So think of it as free tutoring. If you're taking algebra or you want to take algebra, you have chemistry, you have anything, history classes, anything that you're curious to know about, you don't have to pay. You can actually learn. And if you are taking classes and you want to do better with your grades, guess what? This is a great learning tool. So in our household, I'm almost embarrassed to say I have not really tutored my kids that much, because the first time they start to ask me questions about something, I turn to them and I say, have you done a lesson? Have you done a lesson at Khan Academy? So that it's a different perspective of teaching, so that for my kids, each of them learn differently. And what I found is going through some of these classes, it helps them learned this in a different way, and they've been able to grasp more of those concepts. And so that by the time they come to me for questions, number one, Khan Academy has developed these courses with teaching in mind. By the time they come to me, it's really things that are more focused in their area. So something I really highly recommend, if you don't know of this resource, it can help you if you're curious in terms of learning new topics, learning about programming, learning about computers. Again, you don't have to pay. You can actually have some high quality educational tools for free. And I want to share it with you. The other tool that my kids actually recommended is there's a tool called Scratch. It's put out and managed. It came from MIT, and it sounds daunting when you may hear a lot of people say, well, I want to learn programming. I want to learn software tools and IT skills. Scratch is a super fun tool that basically at your age, you can build projects, fun, creative projects. So it doesn't have to be dry and boring. Scratch, they've made it into, you can build little games where you can move people up and down. People can go horizontal, backwards, forwards. It's teaching you all of these things in a fun way, and it's free. And one of my advice to you is if technology, IT is an area you haven't thought about, this is again another way for you to do it, to play around with this free. As long as you have an internet connection, you can learn and figure out some of these resources before you go to college, because sometimes you may think you want to be a programmer. Well, now if you play around with it and you enjoy it, that's a great indicator. Or you've never thought of it before, this is a great way for you to explore it at no cost to you. So my kids really love those. And then the other thing I wish I'd done when I was going off to college was I wish I actually had a written budget. So what I've done here in the next several slides is I'm giving you what I call a teen budget. It has some of the standard fields. There's a link to it, so you can download this. I did not build this. Again, whenever my kids have questions for me, the first thing I tell them to do is go search online first to see, are there tools that have already been built for you? And in this case, it will break it down for you, and it will show you how much are classes for college, how much is food expense, how much is clothing, insurance. If you decide that you need a pet, well, how much do pets cost? What about health insurance? And all these little things that you, and the reason I say this is when I was in high school, I intuitively knew there was a budget, because remember, I was working full time, or I was going to high school, and then I worked actually 5 days a week, even when I was going to high school, and the money was to give to my mom so we could pay rent. So I had concepts of rent, utility, and food, and the car payment, and the car insurance. I just didn't have a neat tool like this listed out for me. And here are some tools that you can do it. And what it does is it helps you figure out, how much can I manage? How much money do I need to either work, or do I get scholarships for, or do I get loans for? I'm going to show you this next tool is the college budget. And again, this has a listing for you of here's the types of places that you can get your tuition paid for, your cost of living. So type of revenue or type of income that can come in. And here are different types of expenses. And again, it's a quick tool that you don't have to develop. You can just actually, once you click on this link, you can go to it. You could do some tweaking, but it helps you think about all the different costs that you would need even if you're living at home. Here's some of the costs that you have to consider. And if you aren't going to live from home, and you're going to go away to a college far away, well, here are the things that you have to consider so that you can have your financial goals. And this is a tool that I actually didn't find. Speak Mentorship was the one that suggested this. And again, I wish I had known about these tools existed, but this is a great way to find scholarships online. So if you said, I know sometimes you think, well, I don't have the resources. I can't go to college, or I can't do this or that. There are tools. There are people who want to help. And this tool called My Scholarly will help you find scholarships. So you'll go to this link. You can then go through the list, and the steps that you have to do is you actually have to do the application. We can give you all these tools. We can tell you about all these tools, but until you are motivated, until you are driven, we can show you the path, but you are the only person who can do that one step at a time. And I remember I used to have this saying when I was in college that I taped in my room, and it's a Chinese proverb that says, "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step." And that was a reminder to myself that I can do it. It's just one step at a time. And sometimes it looks like it's a long road ahead, but if each day, if I just did one little thing at a time, at the end of each day, I will get that much closer to my goal. And so I say this because there's so many tools we want to share with you. We want to help you, but you will have to find it in yourself to do some of these steps. We can't write your college application for you, your essay on why your story needs to be told. Only you can do that, and you have it. You just need to do it. So the conclusion I would have is you can do it, right? And there are tools, there are people there who want to help you, but you have to take those first steps. And finally, enjoy the ride. As I look back, those were some of the hardest times, but that was when I expanded so much. I grew so much. I found so much in terms of what I could do. It's such a wonderful time on the cusp of starting college, or if you've started college, you're starting your career. You have everything ahead of you, and there's so many possibilities. You can definitely do it. That would be my one thing. You can definitely do it and enjoy the ride. Okay. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Hedel.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that informational talk with so many resources, but also insights and the narratives that you shared that make everything that you've shared today just that much more relatable. I think the audience will be able to take a lot away from all of the relevant stories about your niece affording Stanford and about applying for the scholarship, even though your friend wasn't Italian. I think it really is, just a reflection on what you said. It's the stuff that we don't know about, the steps that we don't take because we limit ourselves sometimes. And that's one of my biggest takeaways. I know that being a daughter of immigrants, navigating this piece of paying for college was actually very difficult. And we often do want the same things about going to a four-year college or private university, and we do graduate with loans that we then have to pay back. So if there are tips such as going to a community college for 2 years and still graduating with that bigger university degree at the end, I think those are tips that are ones that should be taken strongly into consideration. So I do have one or two questions, but I will introduce the next speaker here in March. And the reason we don't have their date, Dr. Edmund Ajapong, and the reason we don't have his date is because he has graciously offered to also attend our Speak Summit, which will be either in the end of March or the first or second weekend of April. And so he will be doing a virtual talk, but he will also be doing an in-person talk at our Speak Summit, and we do expect to make that happen in spring. So his date right now is set for March 31st, but we will confirm the date once we have more details. He's an assistant professor at Seton Hall University. He actually is our first male speaker, and he's chosen by demand. When the girls who visited Harvard last March were inspired by the talk that he was giving at the Harvard Alumni of Color Conference, and they wanted to attend his talk. And so he again graciously offered to give his talk for Speak Mentorship. So we're honored to have him join our speaker series and our Speak Summit in the spring. So a question that I did have that I would love to just end this with is, if they're in a position right now where they are looking to earn some money for the college that they may end up going to, or they are working right now, what would you recommend to them in terms of kind of dividing their money into different kind of expenditures? One being, of course, how to save, one being how to invest in themselves, and then they do need to have fun. So how would you divide it? Is it an even split, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3? Is there another category? What would you recommend?
So one of the things that I would I think for each person, it's going to be a bit different because you want to cover your basics, and then the having fun part to me is the cherry on top. But one of the things that I consistently do now, even now that I've graduated and so forth, is continuing my professional development. I consistently every year attend multiple things that are continuing education, professional development. I would definitely highly recommend, and I wish I'd done that when I was early on in my career. I was so busy doing the work, or even in college, so busy just getting through college. I would recommend continuing to learn things like take classes on marketing, take classes, marketing for yourself. It's your branding, it's your continuing knowledge. Remember, college is just not, and education is not the same thing as college. College just facilitates some of that. Your education is ongoing for the rest of your life. And so everybody around me, I always say, set aside a certain amount of money that you can go to take extra courses to learn about yourself, to learn to improve skills in other areas that's not even your main skill, but something that you have curiosity in. Because what you will find is it will help you. It will help develop you into a stronger leader. Imagine as you're developing, if you only have 2 or 3 tools, well, as you progress, you're going to need 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 tools. These professional development courses, they don't have to be taught from a college. They don't have to be taught from a professor. There are lots of organizations offering these, and some of these are even if you go to a lecture or colleges, sometimes they have free lectures or minimal, you pay small amounts. I highly, highly recommend that self-development. Continue to invest in yourself. College is not the only time that you learn. It's the rest of your life. And so I do it constantly. I'm always going to conferences and so forth. And I learn new things all the time. Oh, let me, if I can share one story about continuing development. So in November, just this last year, November, there is a conference for CEOs. It's put on by SAP. It's a global company. It's for CEO leadership development. So I was invited to attend this conference. So I took time and money out to attend the conference. It was in New York. And part of it is getting together with other CEOs of global Fortune 500, 1,000 companies to learn from them. But we also had speakers. And one of the cherry on the top for me was I actually got to sit and hear Presidents Clinton and Presidents Bush give a keynote talk, and then afterwards shake hands with them and get to meet them. And I literally, as I was sitting there attending that conference, I kept thinking, how did an immigrant 40 years ago, nothing to her name, get to sit 20 feet away from 2 past presidents and be able to hear their wisdom? And so continuing that self-development is so important because you will meet many phenomenal people in your life, and you only do it when you attend some of these things. You do that extracurricular activity to improve yourself. So I know it was a long answer, but I'm so glad you asked that question because it's so important that everyone know it's a lifelong journey. Educating, continuing to stay on top of yourself, investing in yourself, it's a lifelong journey.
Just like meeting people like you through this speaker series. So we do tell our young audience that they can, for free, meet individuals like you. And just as you're inspired by meeting the Presidents Clinton and Bush, I'm sure that many are inspired to listen to your talk. Last week, it was the Chief Diversity Officer at Morgan Stanley. She said, be consciously aware of your brand. And I love that because I didn't know that when I was younger. And I think that a little bit is consciously invest in your brand. And that would mean attending free events to even events that are affordable, but definitely furthers your own personal brand, whatever that may be. And through these events, as you mentioned, you can meet just amazing, inspirational people such as yourself, such as Dr. Ajapong. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways I wish I had known when I was younger. There's always going to be time for social, and you should invest in social as well, but always invest in your personal brand.
Right. Exactly. Thank you so much for the privilege to speak with everyone and to share with everyone. I appreciate it. I feel so honored when you asked me, so thank you.
Your story is one that needs to be told. So we appreciate you joining our speaker series. And thanks everyone who've joined, and thanks everyone who will be watching this. When you do watch this, you can always visit us at speakmentorship.org for more information about past and upcoming speaker series events. Thank you again.
Thanks, Atal, for everything you do. Have a good one.